Hello and welcome to the Big H podcast. My name is Mike Hayes, and today I have a longtime Hilton teacher, coach, and I'll call him a friend at this point, Chuck Partridge, and our episode is called Perusing Life with Partridge. You like that alliteration there, Coach?
You know what? I was wondering what you were going to come up with.
And
Couldn't do chatting with Chuck.
because I already used chatting on another podcast.
We made chortle.
Chortle.
We made chortle.
I made chortle. So I might have to change the title, but we'll go with perusing for now.
Okay.
It took me like half an hour to figure that out.
Yeah, it's a big word.
Yeah, this is Chuck Partridge. I'm Mike Hayes, and we'll be along with you for the ride here for a little bit. And Chuck, it's great to have you here. I knew you in a lot of roles. Teacher, one of my favorite coaches. You probably never knew that. I watched you teach other kids and coach other kids. My mom was a big fan of yours. My brother. You've made a big impact on a lot of people. But we like to usually start with a little bit of biographical information, and it's going to test your long-term memory, where you were born, and your mom and dad, and any siblings that you had.
Okay, well, first of all, nice to be here. Nice of you to say the kind words. I was born 1958, September 1st. My parents lived in Phelps at the time. I have an older brother and two older sisters. And shortly after I was born, we moved to Hilton. We lived on South Avenue when I started school. I was the end of the baby boom. My dad was a World War II veteran. And when I went to kindergarten, the class was very large. So we ended up, there were three classes that went to school in the big church there by the library. I don't remember what denomination it is.
It's Methodist now, I think.
Could be Methodist. Yeah. There were three classes there, and I was in a kindergarten class with Mrs. O'Brien. I remember it well. As I've told people many times, I was in kindergarten when John F. Kennedy was killed. And I remember that. That's like one of my early flashbulb memories of kindergarten was Mrs. O'Brien telling us that the president was killed and we got sent home. She cried. I remember it vividly. And then because we were the end of the baby boom, large class, I was one of the first classes to go to school in Northwood when I was in fourth grade. And I was a freshman when the new high school opened. So I basically was in a lot of new buildings because of the size of my generation, really. Let's see. What else can I tell you?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking, if we go back to your family a little bit, okay. Dad was a World War II veteran. Greatest generation, if I might say. Isn't that what they call it?
That's what they call it. Yeah, he was a good man.
Good man.
Yeah.
And you said you had three siblings. They were all older than you. Yep. What was it like being the baby of family?
It was heaven. I never did anything wrong. My oldest sister was actually born before my dad went to Europe, and then the rest of us were after he came back. And I actually have no memory of ever living in the same house as my oldest sister. Mm-hmm. We joke around about it a lot. I have a nephew that's 5 years younger than me. He is a grandfather, which makes me a great uncle. Mm-hmm. Again, we joke around about that. But and then my second sister went off to college. She graduated in 1969 from high school. She went off to college, and my brother went off to college. He went to Michigan State, and I was home alone for most of my high school years. So it was good. It was a fun time. It was a good time to be a kid in the 1970s.
What did your sisters and brother end up doing? Are they still around, may I ask?
My sister actually lives in the house that I grew up in, my oldest sister. She moved in with my mom when her health failed. And my brother is in sales. He majored in microbiology, and he was involved in medical sales. My second sister actually married Jerry Ickes and lived on Peck Road for most of their married life. They've since become snowbirds. And So,
Very good.
yeah, yeah.
And your mom and dad are both
My
passed on?
mom and dad are both gone. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, you said you were in kindergarten at the Methodist Church. You mentioned Mrs. O'Brien. That's pretty good memory.
But she's one I remember. And actually, when I first got hired at Hilton, they have the big meeting with all the staff in the auditorium, and they announced Teacher of the Year. And she won Teacher of the Year that year. And I told her before the meeting started that I remembered her crying the day that Kennedy got killed, and she started to cry again.
Mm-hmm.
And then she commented in her acceptance speech how great it was to see her former student, little Chucky Partridge, which has haunted me since then. There are still guys that call me that, some of the older teachers. Hal Coburn loved to call me that, Dave Smalley.
Yep.
So, yeah, she branded me. And I just saw her last summer. She was in town, and I got together for a lunch with her. So,
Right.
yeah, it was nice.
I think she might have been a teacher at Village because they had pictures of portraits and pictures of all the.
Yeah, she would have been at
So,
Village
yeah.
the year that I had her, except there wasn't room for us. So
I think I pass by her picture every time when I'm taking my students to lunch. So you went to Northwood. You said probably fourth to sixth,
fourth and fifth,
and then what they do next?
Then Merton Williams was 6, 7, 8,
Okay.
and I think it must have been the year that I was in 8th grade. The high school was in split sessions, where half the kids went in the morning and half the kids went in the afternoon, and they actually shuttled back and forth between the Henry Street building and what is now Quest on West Avenue.
When you were going through school, what was like the size of a normal class? Like now it's like 420.
A graduating class?
Yeah, graduating class, let's say.
I really couldn't tell you. Yeah, no. I'm guessing, 300, 400, somewhere in there.
Now, going through Hilton and Hilton schools, other influential people, I mean, you mentioned your kindergarten teacher. Once you got into your, I don't want to say formative years, but when you're starting to figure out what I want to do with my life, like anybody in high school that comes to mind, a coach?
Well, of course, coaches. Al Kratz was the man, still is very influential on me. I'm sure we'll talk about him when we get to wrestling. Bob Westcott, social studies teacher, became a really good friend of mine after I got out of college. We became fishing buddies. He liked to fish the same way I like to fish, and we became fast friends like that. I had a lot of good teachers. I think maybe it's because I taught in the district, but I remember pretty much everybody that taught me. I could tell you all of my elementary school teachers, most of my middle school teachers, and most of my high school teachers. I just had good teachers. I had a good experience. School was fun for me, and I wasn't a very good student. I wasn't a very disciplined student.
But likable.
Yeah, and I could get by. I could get by with minimal effort, and that's pretty much what I did. It took me a long time to become a disciplined student that knew how to do the work and was willing to do the work. I was more than happy to get C's. And it's funny because I've told this story to a bunch of people. The only class I ever failed, the only class I ever got an F in was social studies.
I was afraid you're going to go there, but
yeah. And Tom Szymanski gave it to me, and I love Tom Szymanski. I earned it. I partnered up with a really good friend of mine to do a report, and neither one of us did it. I think we each thought the other guy was going to do it, and neither one of us did it. And it was actually not an F; it was an N. Was what they. Is
that even worse than an F?
No, because I could explain that. I explained that to my parents because it was N. I wasn't failing. N meant needs to improve. So I just needed to improve.
And you agreed with that?
Well, I blamed the other guy.
What was the name of the course? You remember the course?
American history.
American history, because when I went through, he taught Euro Asian studies or something, but
Yeah.
he was intimidating, really tall dude.
Yeah, but he was fun. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
He still is a good guy.
Is
He's
he still around?
Yeah. He lives in, I believe, Arizona now.
Okay.
But I always liked him. He was the department chairman when I got hired to teach social studies, and I always liked him.
Right.
I had really good teachers. I had Maureen Clinton, who is now Maureen Ballerstein.
Yes.
And we just had fun.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we learned a lot, but we had fun.
Now, how about hobbies that you picked up? And this will keep sports separate. Was it fishing early on, or did that come?
Oh, I always fished.
Okay.
You know, my dad was a fisherman. The thing that attracted Bob Westcott and hooked us up, Bob was from the Catskill region, and he liked to trout fish in the streams, not fly fish, but trout fish with small ultralight rods. And my dad was from the southern tier, fished the Cohocton River, Naples Creek, East Coy, West Coy, and Bob knew that. Bob actually remembered from when I was in 6th grade, my uncle, my father, my brother, and myself took a couple of days off and went on what my father called a piscatorial expedition, which meant we were going fishing.
Right.
And Bob Westcott remembered that. And when I student taught at the high school, he brought it up and we started to talk. And he had never fished in that area, but he always wanted to. And I knew the area. So that's what hooked us up.
Pun intended.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, pescatorial, there's like pesca, I believe that's fish in Spanish.
Or Pisces.
Oh, there you go. Mm-hmm. What's your sign? That's one of my questions.
What's my sign?
Yeah.
I'm a Virgo, September 1st.
September 1st. And what's the qualities of a Virgo? I'm an Aquarius, so.
I'm a Virgin.
Okay. All right. Okay, I got you. Now I see the connection.
I really don't know the qualities.
Yeah. Okay. I don't either. I don't really follow those signs.
Reading when I used to get the paper, reading the horoscopes was always a big joke. We would make jokes about it in school.
You know, speaking of newspaper, my mother recalls, and then my younger brother, apparently you have a talent with a jumble in the newspaper. Is that true?
I won a contest.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm like George Costanza. I won a contest. In the faculty room, there was discussion. Ed Evans was always another great teacher, by the way. And if I hadn't gone into social studies, I think I would have done meteorology. I remember when I had earth science, I was a junior for earth science, and he had everyone in his class had to do a weather report and do it on the announcements. And I'm just fascinated by the weather. And anyways, I've become good friends with Ed Evans when I was teaching, and he somehow got a discussion going about the jumble. And Terry Castle, another social studies teacher, she thought she was pretty good, and I thought I was pretty good. So he made up a contest that we had in a faculty meeting, and I won. Enough said.
Who were you playing against? Was
Terry Castle.
Just Terry?
Just Terry and me.
Did you upset her? Like, was not upset her, but like, was she the favorite?
She thought she was.
She thought you.
Yeah, I was able to get inside her head and,
play the mental game against her.
Yeah, I came in like a championship wrestler. There was a lot of flair, and I won. I won't say easily, but handily.
You were on your game that day.
Yeah.
Was the final jumble answer hard, or was
can't. That was so.
Can't remember.
I'm telling you, my memory is not good.
So you were born in 58, did you say?
Born in 58.
So 42. So that makes you 66, 65?
I'll be 66 in September.
Okay, so you're AARP like me too. Then you get that one.
Oh yeah, and Social Security and Medicare and all that good stuff.
How's the body feeling these days? You pretty good? Your health good?
These days?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, I've had a cough.
No, I want you to lie.
Okay. I'm great. I've had a cough, which I'm hoping doesn't show up right now.
You got your water.
But I've had a cough for a couple months. It's been a crazy, weird year. And my knee, I blew out my knee Before I met you.
Mhm.
Actually, I think it was before I met you.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm positive it was before you were in high school. And tore all four ligaments.
Mhm.
And I actually student taught in a full cast from my hip to my
Okay.
toe. Yeah. And that's been acting up. I think arthritis is starting to set in.
Yeah.
You know, that's another benefit of being 65.
I got a brother-in-law who's had a cough for 2 months, so I don't think it's unheard of.
Yeah.
You know.
I did have COVID about a month ago.
You did?
Yeah.
And
But
how did you make it
cold.
through? Like, was it one of those that hit you real hard, or was it like a cold? Because I know people.
It was like a cold. It was like it was. I had the cough, and I went to the doctor, got some medication. The cough started to go away. Then I got a cold,
Mm-hmm.
and I tested for COVID, and I tested positive. I had tested negative a few times before, and then
So there's just the one and only time.
the only time I tested positive, it was a cold.
Right. Well, you look good.
By the time I tested positive, I felt better than I did the 2 days before.
Mm-hmm. Family stay away from you. They didn't get it.
The family stays away from me anyway.
Speaking of family, I remember back when I chaperoned my first Clayton Barner tournament, and we were drawn before, and I was just trying to make small talk with you. You were ready to focus, whatever. Still light on your feet. And I said, how's your kids? And you were funny. And you said, my children? You know, because I was like talking about kids on your wrestling team. How many kids do you have? Children?
2 daughters.
Children. Okay.
2 daughters.
What are they up to, and what are their names? What are their ages? And what?
My oldest is Emily. She's 35. Going to be 35 the end of this month. She lives in Mineola on Long Island. She just moved out there from the city.
Occupation? She
is a visual designer for a pretty high-end jewelry store called Van Cleef and Arpels in Manhattan. Yeah. I think I can say this. Fortunately, I don't think too many people will see this. She just got engaged this weekend. Yeah.
Great. Now, did he come to your hand and ask for her hand in marriage first?
We talked.
That's good.
He talked to my wife and myself when they were in town for Christmas.
Good.
And so it wasn't like a total surprise.
Right.
And,
was she surprised?
No, she was there when he talked to us. You know, it's still, you know, she's 35, but she's still our baby.
Exactly. So, and that's the younger one?
No, that's the older.
Okay, how about the
younger one? Had been living in New York.
Okay.
She was actually roommates with Emily. My youngest is Jessie, and she's 32. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm bad with dates and ages.
Well, you're a history guy.
Yeah. But since I retired,
it slipped.
Well, yeah, I missed my wife's birthday the first year that I was retired. Her birthday's July 1st. I know that. Mm-hmm. I didn't know June ended.
Well, yeah, you're not teaching anymore. Yeah. June was always the most important month not month.
Yeah.
Toughest month to slug through.
Yeah.
It's
always the happiest month.
Now your wife's married, and does she forgive you for it and all that? Is she pretty cool about it? Or?
Oh, yeah. But anyways, Jessie was in New York. She was in show business. Mm-hmm. She was a locations coordinator for a bunch of movies, TV shows, and actually had a pretty good job just before COVID hit. She became personal assistant for Jim Gaffigan.
Comedian,
yeah. And then COVID hit.
Okay.
And everything sort of ground to a standstill. Mm-hmm. And at one point, she basically just said, I've had enough of New York with COVID and so on, and had an opportunity to come back. And she's living with a friend of hers on a horse farm. Okay. So she went from New York City to Byron Bergen. Okay. On a horse farm.
And she's single?
She's in a relationship.
Okay, gotcha.
Good guy.
Good.
They're both good guys. Good. They're okay.
I tell you, I could only imagine being a male and dealing with you as the father-in-law, potential father-in-law. Well, you bust chops is what I'm saying. So
I'm a lot easier on them now than I was on teenage boyfriends. But they're in their 30s. They're all adults. So I have to act like an adult. So I know.
Now, I don't know. I'm just throwing a question. Jesse and Emily, cool names. I like it. How did you come up with those names? Was it wife? Your wife came up with it? Family name?
Actually, the first one was going to be Jessica.
Okay.
And the minute we saw her, it was Emily.
Right.
I mean, it was, we talked about a lot of different names. We knew that both of them were going to be girls. And when the first Jessica became Emily, the next one in line was just going to be Jessica. And they just fit their name.
Right.
It just kind of became natural.
And your wife is Mary, right? And when did
Most of the time.
When did you guys get married, or like when did you guys meet?
We met in high school.
Okay. So she's a Hilton grad.
She's a Hilton girl, yeah. Big family, six kids in the family, 5 siblings. She was a year behind me, and we were friends in high school. She dated one of my best friends most of the time that I knew her. Basketball legend in Hilton, Dave North.
Oh, I know Dave North.
Dave North. Good guy.
I know of him.
Yeah. Oh, you got to meet him. You have to experience Dave North. Great guy.
Yeah.
And still a good friend. We don't see each other enough, but and we were just good friends. And we started to date when I was in college, and then we took some time off, and then I just kind of found each other again. And
what year did you get married? Oh, sorry.
Maybe 84.
Okay.
I'm thinking 84.
And so then, what's Mary's maiden name? Like you said,
Bishop. Bishop.
Kurt Bishop. That's
Kurt
right.
Bishop.
Kurt, that's her brother, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I went to school with Kurt. He was a great guy, but I think he's an electrician.
Yeah, he owns a company.
Good.
He's a contractor.
Kurt said, "Say hi." I'll say hi, but you could say hi.
He's not going to watch.
The right people will watch. Let's put it that way.
Both of them.
All right, so let's say 84. Yeah. So you've been married about 30 years then, right?
More than 30.
More than 40.
Yeah, 39, I believe.
39.
Yeah. Wow. Seeing as how my daughters are both in their 30s, we've been married. Yeah. That doesn't mean anything.
I know. What was it like when your daughters were they left Hilton and were living in Long Island or New York City?
Well, they were Brockport girls.
Okay.
I live in the Brockport School District.
Okay.
Which was a conscious decision. I didn't want to work in the same school that I lived in. I didn't want to know my daughter's friend. My kids, at the time, I didn't have any kids.
Right.
I didn't want to know my kids' friends from school. I wanted to be able to, know them through them.
It's a good decision.
Yeah, because I probably wouldn't have liked, I don't know if I would have liked them or not, but I would have known too much about them. So,
100%.
So what was it like when they left? Well, they both went off to college.
Empty nesting.
Emily went to New Paltz, and Jesse went to Oswego. And neither one of them came back for long. Emily fell in love with New York. All of her friends were down there. New Paltz is about halfway between Albany and New York City. And Jesse was a cinematography major, and it's not a big business around here. And she pretty much either had to go west or east, and she went to New York. It was no big deal.
Okay,
the
no
empty
big deal.
nest was no big deal.
Like, I remember my son went to college this year, and that first moment that he left the nest, what was that like? Cause
the hard part was walking past the bedroom.
Yeah.
The empty bedroom.
Yeah. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the hard part. Yeah. But, it's the way it goes. And it was quieter. We always enjoyed their friends. We still do enjoy their friends. We're still, we see them from time to time. And
so you said that one was recently home at Christmas, the one that got
They were
engaged.
both home.
Oh, they're both home?
Well, Jesse's in Byron, so.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so, well, it's nice Were you able to visit? Did you visit much when they were downstate or whatever? Or?
I'm not a city guy.
Yeah.
And I,
How about your wife?
she's more social than
Mm-hmm.
me. You know, one of the jokes during the pandemic was, my big joke was, I was made for a pandemic. I was perfectly fine to sit in my backyard with my dog,
Uh-huh.
7 days a week,
Right.
no contact with anyone.
Right.
I walk the dog every day, and I became friends with some neighbors that I would see out walking.
Mhm.
I told one woman, I said, I've talked more to you in the last year than any other human being.
Mhm.
And I think pretty much all we ever said was, how's it going?
Mhm.
And I was very comfortable. But to answer your question, um, I've been to New York a few times. I had gone to New York in 1977 when I was in college. And New York in 1977 was a lot different than it is now. It was very much the taxi driver New York.
Mhm.
That's what I saw.
Mhm.
But I was young and wide-eyed, to say the least. The New York that my daughters lived in was different, cleaner, um, better, I guess.
Mhm.
But I never knew where I was. I was never comfortable.
Mhm.
So I'm just not a big city guy. And at one point, you know, we went down there and they said, "What do you want to see?" And I said, "I want to see you.
Mhm.
I'm not a sightseer.
Right.
You know, I'm not really interested in taking too much in. You know, we went to some historical sites, but
Mhm.
it's just not my cup of tea.
Mhm.
Um,
I mean, it's interesting that you said like you were made for a pandemic because anybody that sat one on one with you, you're just hilarious and just the conversation always flows. So you're one of those. Are you introverted? I don't know how.
I'm
So
introverted until I get in a situation.
Mhm.
You know, like I will always resist going to a party, a social event, and then I have to get dragged out.
Mhm.
You know, um, uh, I get accused of talking too much. I didn't know if I was gonna, which Chuck was gonna show up today. If I was gonna,
The social Chuck is.
if I
and
was
I'm
gonna
glad.
have nothing to say. And don't forget, you know, I spent my living, I made my living talking to people, and maybe you can relate to this. I would assume that you could. I always felt like from the time I got out of my car in the parking lot until the time I got back in my car in the parking lot, somebody was tugging at me.
Mm-hmm. Without a
And
doubt.
yeah, and when I got home, I wanted to shut down,
Right.
And rewind and plus and you're an elementary school teacher.
Yeah, we get tugged probably a little bit more, but
Well,
no, I'm not going to compare and
well,
contrast. You go
I'll
ahead.
tell you, I used to think you got it made, and then I went into my daughter's classroom, and I think I might have been there 10 minutes, and I couldn't stop apologizing to her teacher. Um, it's a different circumstance, but it's a tough job.
It is, but
But I was a classroom teacher as opposed to a phys ed teacher, and I had a lot of papers to grade. I had a lot of work to do, and I always, and again, these are things I've said a million times. I always thought that the job was going to get easier the more time I spent doing it, and it never got easy. And I don't think it's supposed to get easy.
No.
I think you should be constantly reflecting and making changes. And I would be, again, talking about social and being at parties, whether it was coaching wrestling or teaching social studies. If I was at a party and I had an idea, I would pull a business card out of my wallet and start writing on the business card ideas. You know, this might be a better way to teach that. So, and I'm not saying I was any great shakes. I'm just saying that's the way I took the job. I never stopped thinking about it. And then it got to the point where when I retired, I just had boxes and boxes of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of like my babies, you know. I was very protective. I did my own lessons. I always thought, and we could get into educational philosophy, but I always thought you should be able to walk into someone's classroom and say, "That's Mike Heiss's classroom.
Mm-hmm.
That's Chuck Partridge's classroom." You shouldn't all be doing the same thing. And I was very protective. Um, I didn't share my toys with my fellow classmates. I would have got a bad grade on that report card as well. But it was stuff that I had come up with. And I might take some ideas from people and twist them and change them up. But I think it was hard work. And I think coaching was the same way.
Now, before I get I got a couple quotes here from people that have seen you in action. When you were teaching, how did you relax when you went home? Did you just kick your feet up and?
I like TV. I'm not gonna lie.
I love TV. So, like, was it comedies? Was it news? What did you
comedies?
Get into?
Comedies. Yeah.
Name a couple if you could for us.
Well, at the time, MASH was on all the time. I could pretty much tell you, and I could pretty much tell you what the episode is within like 30 seconds. Same with Seinfeld. I love Seinfeld. Love Bob Newhart. But there's a movie, Bob Westcott introduced me to the movie The Manchurian Candidate, the original.
They use that all the time when they're talking about politics.
Yeah.
What is, first of all, you tell me what it means, and then you tell me the movie.
The Manchurian Candidate is a guy gets kidnapped during the Korean War, and almost his entire squad is killed, and those that survive remember him as a hero. He saved them. Well, they got captured and hypnotized by the Chinese and the Russians.
Okay.
And there was an operative in the United States that would hook up with him, and he was going to assassinate a presidential candidate.
Okay.
It's a great movie.
And Bob Westcott introduced you to that movie?
Yeah, because he saw it when it first came out. And the understanding I have is Frank Sinatra owned the rights to the movie. And he was good friends with John F. Kennedy. Kennedy got killed the year that film came out. And they pulled it. And it hadn't been shown until my daughter Emily was born 35 years ago. And Bob rented it and brought it to our house, and we watched it. And anyway, there's a line in the movie where the guy says, I think the world is divided into two distinct kinds of people. People who walk into a room and turn the TV off, and people who walk into a room and turn the TV on. And I'm one that turns it on. And I just leave it on all day. I might not watch it. I may have the TV on and I'll be reading a book. But I turn the TV on. The TV is on. It doesn't mean I watch it, but I'm familiar with I'm into pop culture.
Sure.
And now that we've been streaming a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of bad stuff. And I actually said the other night, I don't know whether it's because we have closed captioning now. My wife doesn't hear so well. And a lot of the stuff is British, and you have to have closed captioning because they don't speak English. And I think who was it? I think some great philosopher said the Americans and the British are two people divided by a common language. But anyway, whether it's the closed captioning or whether it's just oversaturation, but I watch these shows and I know they're acting. And acting is supposed to involve the suspension of
disbelief,
of belief. So you're supposed to not realize that they're acting, but either they're bad actors or it's the closed captioning. But I can't find anything I want to watch. The last thing I really enjoyed that we watched was a show, you might like it, called Lucky Hank.
Is it on HBO or what is it?
I don't know.
I can't remember. What's the plot idea?
Bob Odenkirk is the head of an English department in a small college, and it's really good.
Yeah.
It wasn't on for long.
Comedy, dramedy.
Yes,
Okay.
dramedy.
Yeah. I have some things at the end, but 1976 was when you graduated, right?
Graduated in '76.
What was the Academy Award-winning movie?
My favorite movie of all time.
Is it really?
Yep, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Bingo, you got it.
My favorite movie of all time, and that's a question that I ask people. What's your favorite movie of all time?
First of all, it's a great movie, but I go Gladiator with
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe.
Mm-hmm.
It just whatever. I don't need to get into my reasons why I love it. Same thing along those lines. Who was your favorite besides Jack in that role? Who was your favorite role in that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
In that movie?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's so many good characters. Mr. Harding is fabulous.
Was he the one that was, I don't know which one
he was the one that Jack picked on all the time. And he was dying when he acted in that movie. He died shortly after the movie came out. I think his name was William Redfield.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Billy Bibbit is great. We actually read that play in my English class when I was a junior in high school.
Really?
Yeah.
So it was a play first and then a movie?
Yeah. And I'm not sure if it was a book before it was a play. It was written by a guy named Ken Kesey, who also wrote the Kool-Aid Acid Test.
Okay.
He was a hippie, Grateful Dead guy. Traveled around with the Grateful Dead. I'm trying to remember. The Merry Pranksters, they were called. And he actually swore that he just died recently, but he swore he would never see the movie because he didn't like the way it was changed. But it's a good movie.
It's a great movie. And do you, now that you're a little bit older and stuff, do you have the stamina to sit through a 2-hour movie? Or
depends on the movie.
True. What's the last movie you watched?
I tried to watch. The last movie I tried to watch, it was new. It was called. I can't even remember what it was called.
All right. What was it about?
It was actually about a woman that fell in love with and married a 7th grade student. It was based on a true story. I can't remember what it's called. It's nominated for awards. It didn't grab me. It's actually about an actress that meets with the people involved. She's going to star in a movie about this person. I watched Oppenheimer. I thought it was okay, but I had read a lot about Oppenheimer, and what I read and what the movie showed didn't jive completely. I watched Killers of the Flower Moon. Again, the book, I like the book better. And
are you a reader now?
I never used to say that. I never used, and it was a big joke with my friends at school. They would say the book was better, and I'd say, "There's a book," or I would tell people, "I heard they wrote a book after the movie came out."
Now you said
yes, I am a reader, by the way.
You are okay. That's my question.
I didn't used to be.
Yeah.
I never read. Very seldom in high school. Again, I did minimal amount, and I never, for a while, read in college. I never really became an active reader until we had kids, and I made a conscious decision that I wanted my kids to see me read.
Good modeling helps out a lot.
And my daughter Emily is a voracious reader. Voracious.
See, a good reader
has a good vocabulary.
Has a great vocabulary. Rich Lapani, you know well. Right? He can spell. I always tease him, spell this word, and he always nails it.
George Costanza could spell anyone's name.
Well, I'm not going to call Lapani George Costanza, but I said, how'd you get so good at spelling? He goes, I'd read the sports page from cover to cover. When you read and read and read, and you're an active reader like you just said, your vocabulary is... Yeah. All right, now I got to get to this. I reached out to a couple people, and this person, I'll give you his name at the end. Chuck Partridge's humor is unparalleled in the history of education in Hilton. Clever, quick-witted, and dry. Chuck was always ready to make me laugh at the copier while passing him in the hallway. He also happened to be exceptional at word jumbles. However, the only thing that matches Chuck's humor would be his sincerity. I remember some very kind words he shared with me during our time as colleagues. Chuck was a teacher and voice every student wanted to hear, and I'm sure those who were fortunate enough to have Chuck as a teacher can still hear his voice.
My mom, That's so nice of her to say that.
That was
before
David
she
Heiss
passed.
wrote that.
Really?
So he knew you as a teacher and then
Mhm.
a TA and then as a colleague.
Mhm.
I know it's hard sometimes to hear accolades from other people on the spot, right? But you're a humble guy. What does that say when you hear something like that? Because I got a couple more that you're going to get that you don't like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I question people's judgment
Mhm.
when I hear that kind of stuff.
Well, I got some other things here that are like they're not my judgment on other people, but you've had your share of
Well,
accolades.
keep
in
them
your
coming.
time.
Keep
I
them
will.
coming.
Well, if we go back to like we were talking about hobbies, we got fishing. How about the sports? You hear that?
Yes. It's a siren outside.
Okay. Was your dad in the fire department?
Oh, marginally.
Okay. This is manic conversation, but I love it. That's the way it should be. Sports. When did you find an interest in sports? What were they? Maybe some, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, I grew up on Parma Center. Okay. My next door neighbor was Steve Kaiser.
Mhm.
Same birthday as me.
Mhm.
When they moved in, we became fast friends. Still good friends. He lives in Portugal now. He was a sectional champ sprinter, 100-yard dash,
Mhm.
and relay. Well, he was one of the best athletes around, really fast. Good football player. Down the road was Jim Ickes.
Yeah.
Say
Basketball player, baseball, right?
anything that you
Right.
wanted to play.
I've seen him play golf.
Yeah, he can do anything. He went to Cardinal Mooney.
Mhm.
He was a baseball player, soccer player, basketball player. Started 3 years for Cardinal Mooney, who was one of the best basketball teams in the Rochester area.
Mhm.
I was a sectional champion wrestler. Okay. Jim Ickes could beat Steve Kaiser in a sprint, and he could beat me in wrestling. He was the best athlete around. And there was always something going on in our neighborhood. There was a baseball game. We'd play catch. We'd play football. We'd play golf out in the backyard, you know.
Mhm.
We just played. I mean, that's I think that's what kids did back then. You know, it was at that point it was the early 70s, and summer vacation hit, and even before summer vacation hit, we would go outside. We would have breakfast. We'd go outside, and we wouldn't come back until dinner. Our parents never knew where we were. You know, we'd be out in the woods. We'd be out playing baseball, football, soccer, whatever. You were just gone. And nobody worried about it. We'd be riding our bicycles. We just played all the time. And then I was thinking about, you know, talking to you, and because I'm old Hilton. When I was in school, there was no football team.
Right.
And I think when I was in 7th grade, maybe they were trying. There was a drive to get a football program in Hilton, and they did a fundraiser called Feet for Football, and it was a 25-mile walk, basically around the perimeter of the village of Hilton, and everybody did it. It was just an event. You know, you got sponsors, and you walked 25 miles, and there were checkpoints. And I kind of joked around and said, you know, I'm doing this because if everyone plays football, I'll make the soccer team. Because back then they had recreation soccer, recreation basketball, and you'd go on a Saturday morning and play that, and that was it. And other than that, the only thing there was Little League, and that was summertime. And I think Jim DuPont ran the basketball and the soccer, and you just played. But then when I was in 8th grade, Pop Warner football came to Hilton. And that's another first. You know, I was first at Northwood, first in the Methodist Church, first in the high school. I played on the first Hilton Raiders football team. And Steve Kaiser talked me into it. And it was a great experience. But there were a lot of kids from Greece on the team. Coach was from Greece. But it was great. Great guy, great coach. Love the guy. I actually saw him early in the pandemic this older gentleman came in to the golf course that I work at, and I was at the desk, and we were talking just about the golf course, and I said, "Do you mind if I take off my mask?" He said, "No, not at all." He took off his, and I said, "You're John Furtari." And he said, "Yeah, I am." And I said, "Chuck Partridge. You were my Pop Warner football coach
No way.
in 1972.
Uh-huh.
It was great.
Yeah.
Fabulous." And I haven't seen him since, but it was just a great minute for me.
So they did have wrestling when you hit the high school, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he's kind of skated over you as sectional champion. What weight class were you?
Well, I'll go back.
Okay.
To finish the football thing.
I'm sorry.
The year that I was in 8th grade was the first year there was a football team in Hilton.
Who was the coach? Was that Dick Todd?
Dick Todd.
Okay.
He was hired out of Corning, Dick Todd and Pat LaBarbera, and it was a freshman football team where they allowed sophomores to play because it was the first year for a football team. They played at Henry Street, bleachers that held probably 25, 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
It was the old soccer field and baseball field when Henry Street was the high school. Anyway, and we would walk from the high school to Henry Street, use the basement as the locker room. I think it might have even been the gymnasium as the locker room, and then come out and practice at Henry Street. And they played games there. That was the home field. And then my freshman year, I was on the freshman team, and they had a JV team. And my sophomore year was the first varsity team that they had.
And then you played.
And then I played varsity when I was a junior and senior.
Who were some of your teammates?
Steve Kaiser, Dave North, Bob Clark was a lineman, Don Venata. Dave North and Bob Clark moved into the district when we were freshmen. They didn't know each other. Dave was from somewhere in the city, and Bob was from Charlotte. And they became next door neighbors on North Reese Road. And we met them when they were freshmen. And Bob Clark became a wrestler. He was captain the same year that I was. He was a sectional champ also. And again, still good friends. He lives in Florida now. But just great guys. Tony Lanzalaco was another guy that I'm still in contact with. Jim Maxwell, Greg Blossom. You're on a team, so you become friends. Right. So,
what did you play in? What positions did you play in football?
When I was in Pop Warner, I was a guard and a defensive lineman.
Okay.
Because there was a size limit, and I was right in the middle. Weighed about 105, 110 pounds, and in high school I played receiver, like a flanker or tight end, and outside linebacker, defensive end sometimes, depending on what year it was. And
how was the success in the football program when you got into varsity at that point?
We actually, my senior year, we started out like gangbusters. We beat Batavia, we beat Athena. We started off really well, and then we just hit a
skid.
Yeah, and just couldn't score. We lost to, I think we played Marshall, and it's funny, you remember these things. Marshall beat us 6-0. They intercepted a pitch and ran it back for a touchdown. And I think we ended up like 4-5. Webster Thomas was really, really good back then. And Greece Arcadia was really, really strong at the time. Those were the two best teams around.
Okay. So that was football. Can we scoot over to wrestling?
We can scoot over to wrestling.
You take your wrestling career first, and then eventually we'll get to college.
Okay. Well,
when did you, I guess I'll start it off. When did you first start wrestling, and when did you just have a love for it? Because I got to tell you, that's a tough sport to I'm going to say it, to love, because it's just so brutal mentally and physically. I don't know how you guys do it. Did it never faze you?
No, there were times. There are still times where it's hard. There's no doubt about it. When I was in 6th grade, I was trying to remember this again. My memory's not so good, but I believe when I was in 6th grade, Al Kratz was the high school coach, and I think he came over to the Merton Williams to try and do a little unit after school, and something about him, I love the guy.
Mm-hmm.
He and I just clicked, and I wanted to be around him, and so I was attracted. And then Clayton Barnard was 4 years older than me. Decided he was going to wrestle, and I was friends with the family. My parents were friends with his parents, and his younger brother was a year older than me. And my dad had wrestled at Syracuse University, so he would show Clayton Barnard stuff on the floor, and again, more attraction. And Clark Barnard and I, when we were in 7th grade, I was in 7th, Clark was in 8th, we would walk from Merton Williams down the railroad tracks to Henry Street.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they practiced.
Mm-hmm.
And they would let us practice. We would go in the back of the practice room, the gym, and they would give us a corner on the mat, and Clark Barnard and I would wrestle each other. We would try to do what the JV and varsity kids were doing. Right. And the program wasn't very good at the time. Mm-hmm. And they let us just go and practice. And I remember I had a big Buffalo Bills gym bag. Mm-hmm. Butch Bird it was autographed by Butch Bird. I didn't even know who he was.
You carry it down the railroad.
Down the railroad tracks, yeah. And it was winter. It was cold, but we would go to practice every day, and we would go to the matches, and we didn't, we didn't attract any attention, but then they had a tournament in Spencerport, because Spencerport had a youth program.
Wasn't Spencerport?
Spencerport was a powerhouse. Okay. And I went to the tournament when I was in 7th grade, and a whole bunch of kids from Hilton went. And I didn't make the weight that I thought I was going to wrestle in, and I got pushed up a couple of weights. So I was wrestling kids that were like 10, 15 pounds heavier than me. And I took second in the tournament. Mm-hmm. I don't know how. It was just pure luck. Right. But there's the spark. Right. Okay, wow, I might be able to do this. Mm-hmm. So now I'm in 8th grade, and I'm still going over to practice, and I'm thinking I'm pretty good. And I make the weight class that I want for this tournament, and I get beat first round. I'm done. Mm-hmm. But I still thought I was pretty good. And now Clayton Barnard's career is starting to take off, and they put mats in. They lived in a split level house, and on the one level there was a family room that we used to watch TV in, and then they put mats in there. And when I would go over there, Clark Barnard and I would wrestle matches. At the time we were the same size. I ended up bigger than him, but we would wrestle matches, and we would take turns. He would be the kid from Spencerport, and I would be the kid from Hilton, and we would wrestle a match. And then I would be the kid from Spencerport, and he would be the kid from Hilton. We would wrestle a match, and it just kind of took off. And then when I was a freshman, we had a freshman team, and I thought I should be wrestling JV, mm-hmm. but unbeknownst to me, my father had other plans. He didn't want me. He wanted me to get more experience. So I wrestled freshman that year, and I was undefeated. And at the end of the year, they moved me up to JV. And I think I was like 6-2 on JV. Mm-hmm. And then the next year I was on varsity. It just kind of took off from there. And my sophomore year, we knew we were going to be good, but we ended up winning the league. We wrestled Spencerport. We were both ranked in the top 10 in the state. And it was in the old high school, the new high school, but the old gym, mm-hmm. where the bleachers were much taller. Mm-hmm. And we sold out the gym.
Okay.
I looked I have a newspaper clipping, and it said there were over 1,500 people there. And what I remember about that match was we couldn't warm up in the gym because there were so many people standing behind our bench. We had to go out in the hall to warm up before we wrestled. It was very exciting. And we won that match. It was the first time we beat Spencerport ever.
And then, so which years did you win the league? How old were you when you won the league?
I was a
sophomore. Now, how'd you guys do junior and senior?
We lost to Spencerport.
Okay. And then were there sectionals then too, or was it just the
when I was
title?
When I was a sophomore, you had to place in the county tournament, top 3, I think, to go to sectionals, and I didn't. I think Hilton had maybe 3 guys that did that year, and then the next year, sectionals were open to everyone, and if you placed in the top 3 in the sectionals, you went to the state qualifier.
Okay.
And we had 8 guys go the next year. We were actually a better team when I was a junior than we were when I was a sophomore, but Spencerport was better too.
Who was the Spencerport coach?
Walt Tyke.
Walt Tyke. And then the Hilton coach, of course, was Al Kratz. So you're basically, what I get from you is you got enamored with the coach, right?
Yeah.
And he just fostered an interest. You mentioned a big name, Clayton Barnard. Tell us a little bit about his history, and of course, I believe he passed away at a young age. The tournament name.
Well, like I said, we're family friends, the Barnards and the Partridges. When my parents went out of town, that's where I stayed. He developed an interest in wrestling. My father would help him out with some stuff, and he just took off. And the story always was that he told Al Kratz, "I'm going to be a state champ." And nobody had ever dreamt of that in Hilton before. And when he was a senior, he went to the state tournament undefeated, lost in the semifinals to a kid from Long Island that he had beaten earlier in the year, and he finished 3rd.
Okay.
And then he was an All-American in college, and he went to Ashland University in Ohio. He was All-American, and then transferred to the University of North Carolina to try his hand at Division I. And I really don't know what his success level was there. Right. And then came back home, student taught here, and the summer after he student taught here, was diagnosed with leukemia.
Okay. And
died like 6 weeks later.
So it's quick.
It was very quick. Yeah.
And then how long did it take from his passing till when they honored him with the name of that tournament?
I know that the Hilton wrestling team, and again, after I graduated, Al Kratz had some fantastic teams, really good teams. And but again, Monroe County was so good, and Spencerport was so good, always. That again, you could be at one point, one of the teams that I was the JV coach of, we finished 4th in our division, and we were ranked 15th in the state. There was Spencerport, East Rochester, and Brighton were ahead of us. But anyway, Hilton had gone to a tournament in Buffalo. Hilton and Spencerport and McQuaid, and I think Fairport, went to this tournament in Buffalo, and they finished top 4. And I think they went a couple of years, and then the tournament disbanded. And the story I got was Walt Tyke said to Al Kratz, "You should take that tournament. Just invite everyone that came to Maryville and call it the Clayton Barnard tournament." And that was what happened. And Al Kratz went a couple of steps further. He invited the number 1 team in the country, St. Ed's from Ohio, a couple of teams from Erie, Pennsylvania, another team from Ohio. It was a great tournament for a long time. So top notch.
That's awesome. That is really good. That's awesome.
I mean, I could go on and on. And that's
not stopping.
And that's another thing that people would used to ask me, "How's your wrestling team?" And I would say, we're okay, because I could have talked for 2 hours about my wrestling team, but nobody wanted to hear it. It's sort of like, "How's it going?"
Right.
well, my back hurts, I got a cough, like Rosanna Dana.
Mm-hmm.
You could go on and on. So I would just say, we're okay. My standard line about my wrestling team is what I say about the Buffalo Bills now. We're good enough to lose to anyone. And I always meant that.
Right.
A bad day,
You can get beat.
Yeah.
You get beat.
Yeah.
Any other guys you wrestled with that, were state champions or something? I mean, you said you had
Dave Jurgens.
That's the name I remember.
Dave Jurgens, my junior year, was a state champion. Clark Barnard went to states my sophomore year. He didn't place. It was a different tournament back then. It was harder to place in the tournament. And then he lost in the finals of the state qualifier the next year to a kid that took second in the state that year and won it the next year. We had a lot of good guys. Paul Arnold, Keith Rodas, just tough, hard-nosed guys. Carl Forsyth, Aki Hara, Larry Gibbs. We had a lot of good guys.
Your memory's better than you said it. You thought it was.
On some things. I remember names. I don't remember dates.
Right.
Everything's a blur. It all blends together.
Fond memories of wrestling. I don't know how you do it. I just don't know how.
Cutting weight is not a fond memory.
Is it different nowadays?
Yes, it's a lot different.
What did you guys do in the 70s? Like, what was the process? The suits, garbage bags.
We wore rubber. They used to sell vinyl sweats that were rubberized inside, and we wore that, and we just worked like crazy to lose weight. Some of us didn't eat. It was a grind. It was really, if you didn't make the weight, you didn't make the team. Now it's much more closely managed.
So when like, let's say you're wrestling at 8:00 at night, when do they weigh you guys in?
Back then?
Yeah.
Back then you weighed in the next morning.
So you'd weigh in after you did the match?
Like if we were at a tournament? If we were at like a match?
Let's say like a match, a Monroe County.
Okay, so let's say Spencerport's coming to Hilton. Okay, big match. Spencerport would get there. We would take them to their locker room. They would come to our locker room. I would weigh in, you would weigh in. Then the next weight class, I would weigh in, you would weigh in. Just like that. And then you had basically, as long as it took the JVs to wrestle, to get hydrated.
And would they let them eat then too, or just liquid? Okay.
Whatever you could do, whatever you wanted to do. And there was a lot of serious weight cutting. I'll tell you a college story. I wrestled at MCC one year, and I lost in the semi. It was a national qualifying tournament. I lost in the semis. I was winning. I was cutting a lot of weight. I was winning, and in the third period, I just ran out of gas, and I got beat by a guy who is a coach in Section 4 now. Still see him around from time to time. But, excuse me, after I lost, it was the end of the year, and I was just bummed. And I could still qualify for nationals if I took third. And I was considerably overweight, and I had until midnight to make weight that night. And a teammate of mine came up to me. This is the stuff you remember. This is what makes wrestling special. A teammate of mine came up and said, how heavy are you? And I said, really heavy. I'll spare you the details. And he said, I'm heavy too. Let's work out. And he worked out with me till midnight. I got on the scale. I made weight. And he saw me and said, did you make weight? And I said, yeah. I said, how about you? He said, I haven't been overweight all year. He worked out with me for 3 hours.
So he got you to where you wanted to be.
Yeah.
How much?
Still see him around.
I mean, like, how much weight could you cut in 3 hours? I mean, are you going to say it depends? And if you tell me I have to kill you, or that
it was a lot of weight.
Yeah,
it's not the kind of thing that you
want bodies to go through. Yeah. And then how's it changed now to like? Oh, now that was how were tournaments? You said like were tournaments
a tournament you would weigh in before the tournament started. You would wrestle a couple of times, 2 or 3 times on a Friday night. When I was in high school, and then you would weigh in the next morning. Then when I was coaching, you would weigh in that night, and then you could go and eat and come back the next day, and God knows what you would weigh.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've changed it back now to the morning weigh-in, because that is supposed to prevent you from doing crazy things. And it's a good idea. I often think, like, if I could do it over again, would I? And the answer is probably yes, because I probably wouldn't have made the team if I didn't. And I might not have been as successful. So
How has wrestling evolved? It's just a very general question, but
it's unrecognizable.
Try to make me see it. Try to make me recommend it.
I don't.
This is what I recall in high school. You guys coming out. Well, you were past your prime. Coming out of that small gym, just drenched in sweat and red from your faces.
Practice is the same. The technique is much different.
Okay.
The technique is.
Tell me about the technique then, a little bit of how that's.
It would be. There's a lot more what would be referred to as funk. It would be really hard to get into
unless I stood up with you and you started throwing me around in my basement.
And that's possible,
right?
I mean, if things go well, we can do that. But it's a lot funkier. It's a lot. I think it's a lot harder to officiate because nothing is as clear cut as it used to be. When does a takedown become a takedown? When is control? It's very. I mean, if you just watch Yanni Diakomahalis wrestle, and then watch the best guys in the state from the 1970s, and it's unrecognizable. I don't know if that's accurate, but it's much different.
Is there any documentaries that if I want to go on some YouTube channel, no,
I don't think so. I mean, if you wanted to watch YouTube footage of old state tournaments, and I went to a tournament last weekend to watch my great nephew wrestle, and he's very funky. But one of the guys I was with said, I can't imagine wrestling now because of the flexibility that exists. I think my hips and my knees are sore just from watching last weekend.
Where was the tournament?
It was at RIT. Yeah, it was a national qualifier for Division III. My great nephew won it, by the way.
He did? Congratulations. What's his last name?
Alex Sampson. He was a state champion from Victor and wrestles for St. John Fisher now.
Well, congratulations to Mr. Sampson.
Yeah.
It's in the blood.
Nationals are his dad was a good wrestler too.
Yeah?
Yeah. From Pelman.
Okay.
But the national tournament is a week from Thursday, I think.
You going to make that, or are you going to?
Oh, God,
no.
It's in Wisconsin.
What states around the country? Is there states that are more prone to high stake wrestling? Ohio, yeah.
Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Jersey.
Why is that? Is it just Midwest?
It's just popular.
Yeah.
It's just more popular. Yeah. More emphasis on sports too, I think.
All right. Now, you're in high school, and then how did you end up picking a college, a major, and where did you go?
My college career is nothing to write home about. I went to Wilkes College in Pennsylvania, Division I, and I think that's probably why I went there. I was sort of enamored with Pennsylvania, and they were interested in me. And
to wrestle.
Yeah. And again, I was not a good student, but I did very well on the SATs.
Okay.
My SAT scores got me into college. I went bigger than I should have gone, and was not a good student. And it was 1977, and I did not attend a lot of classes. And when I got my grades, I vividly remember my dad sitting down. Back then, the grades came to the parents.
Okay.
And he saw my grades and said, "This is embarrassing. and I'm not going to finance your bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
That summer I got a job at General Motors.
Okay.
Um, I worked there for the summer, and then decided I didn't want to go back to school.
Okay.
It was a waste of my time.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I was young. I graduated when I was 17. Went to college when I was 17. Turned 18 when I was a freshman in college. And I asked if I could stay at General Motors. And they kept me, yeah, we'll keep you. So I stayed at General Motors. And at the end of a year, I asked for a leave of absence. And I had met a guy at General Motors who was friends with the wrestling coach at MCC. So he introduced me to him. I decided to go to MCC. I asked for a leave of absence. They gave it to me. I didn't wrestle that first year. And then went back to General Motors, worked the summer, asked for another leave of absence, and they didn't give it to me, so I quit and went back to MCC, wrestled for a year, and then transferred to Brockport and worked all through college.
First of all, at GM, what was your job there? Were you assembly line?
Assembly line.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you went to Brockport, did you already know your major was history?
I actually got in line for anthropology because the line was shorter.
Are you honestly serious?
Yep. Yeah.
Anthropology, that's the study of bones, right?
That's archaeology, but that's a branch of anthropology. And again, I still, at that point, I was still kind of rudderless. And I had taken a couple of anthropology classes at MCC, and then I took a class, and again, it's like 1979, 78, somewhere in there, and the class required that we took the professor's data that he collected in his anthropological study of some Micronesian island, and we had to compile the data on a computer, and I couldn't even log on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still technologically handicapped.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't log on, and I would go into the computer lab where there were 12 computers,
Mm-hmm.
and I would try to log on. And eventually, I just said, I can't do this, and changed my major to history. And Brockport had a great history department. I loved it.
Did you know you wanted to teach it at that point?
Oh, yeah, I knew.
First of all,
you know
what do you do with history if you don't teach it?
Good question. But you have a degree.
Right.
But I knew pretty much in junior high I wanted to be a social studies teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I had Bob Westcott. I had Bob Sharman. I wanted to be like those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I've neglected Ron Heinmarch was a big influence as well. And I could see the lifestyle of a teacher. And it just seemed like a cool thing to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was in high school, before we went to college, my neighbor, Steve Kaiser, and we were out with some buddies, and we were talking about, the future and what are we going to do. And he said, he's going to be a social studies teacher. And I don't think I ever even shared that with him, but he just knew. He'll end up a social studies teacher.
Besides GM, did you have any earlier occupations prior you went to college, growing up?
I worked on the ICAS fund.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
And then
that was not fun.
They worked you hard?
It's hard work.
Yeah. And what type of work did you do?
Mostly baling hay, stacking hay.
Mm-hmm. What road is their farm on?
It was on Parmesan.
Okay. So then you're at Brockport State. Did you live on campus?
No, lived off campus.
Okay. And then where'd you do your student teaching?
I was probably destined to student teach somewhere else other than Hilton.
And that's where you student taught?
And I ended up student teaching in Hilton because I blew out my knee. I had knee surgery, and I was in a cast. Mm-hmm. And I really couldn't. I couldn't even drive actually, because it was my right leg, and so I ended up student teaching at Hilton.
Okay.
And riding to school every day with Pat LaBarbera.
And so how long were you in a cast? I mean, like
6 months.
6 months?
Yeah, it was back in the old days.
So nowadays they get you out in what, 6 weeks?
I don't even think
probably.
they put you in a cast
Yeah.
anymore. I was in 2 casts. I was in a cast from my hip to my toe to begin with, and then after probably 3 months, I had like a tube cast from my hip to my knee, and then a hinge and a cast from my knee to my ankle.
You did that at Injury and Wrestling?
Yeah, coaching JV. The first year that I coached
What, did
JV,
some kid throw you around and just
Greg
twist
Sadwick.
I know Sadwick.
Yeah. That was his claim to fame. But he didn't throw me. My knee just gave out.
So you were coaching the JV. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember your student? Who was
The student taught with Bruce Klingler.
There you go. Yeah. Is he still around?
He's around. He's not teaching.
Okay. Yeah. I figured that.
I still see him from time to time.
God bless those guys getting retired or whatever. Your first job, was it at Hilton and you stayed at Hilton?
My first job was at Hilton. The year after I student taught, I got a job at Hilton, 3/5, all non-Regents classes. That was back Regents, non-Regents. It was great. For about 5 weeks, I thought I had made a huge mistake. And then I just kind of settled in and figured it out, realized I wasn't going to win if I tried to fight with sophomores in high school. And it ended up being great. Ended up loving my classes.
What advice, this is probably for the end, but like new teachers, like what would you say to a new teacher, getting that first job? Like one of the things you just said, try not to get into a match with kids. Like maybe that's meant for the end of the podcast.
Well, you know what?
If you reflect back on it.
I remember seeing a quote from Kevin Costner. I take what I do very seriously. No, I know that what I do isn't very serious, but I take what I do very seriously. It's only high school, and you need to find a way. I felt like when I was teaching, and I've said this before, I felt like I was coaching social studies. And a coach's job is to find a way to make people successful. And a teacher's job is to find a way to make them successful as well. And have a sense of humor. You better have a sense of humor. And laugh at yourself.
Describe one of those first few lessons. I don't know about first year teachers. I felt very feeble and stuff.
Yeah.
What did you feel like that first year navigating your way through?
After, like I said, maybe the first 5 weeks was a struggle. And then, I don't know, something just clicked, and I realized you couldn't do anything for too long. And this was something I learned at wrestling practice. You couldn't do anything for too long or you're going to lose them. So you got to move around. Right. We're going to do this for 5 minutes, and we're going to do this for 5 minutes. And cover a lot of ground and change things up. And try not to be boring.
You're done anything but boring. I think the sense of humor shines through. Did you have a specialty in like one part of history, or was it either American or
no? I started teaching European, 10th grade, and I taught 3 sections of that. And then the next year I was part-time again, and I think I taught 2 Regents classes and 1 non-Regents class. And then I lost my job.
Was that budget cuts?
Budget cuts. Yeah, budget cuts. And I remember in a meeting talking to people years down the road when the budget was struggling and they were talking about making cuts. And I said, if the numbers aren't there, the community has to, they can only afford so much. And, it's not the job, and this is probably not stuff that I should be saying, but it's not the job of the community to provide jobs for teachers.
100%.
And if the numbers aren't there, they need to make cuts.
Right.
And I'm sorry that it might be you that gets cut.
Right.
But is there anybody in here that's ever lost their job because of budget cuts? And I said, I can only think of one person. And that was me.
Right.
And I spent the summer looking for a job.
Right.
And I got a job at Lindenville.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my first head coaching job. And it was also my first full-time teaching job. And it was a good experience.
Did you stay in Hilton and commute, or did you move?
I lived in Spencerport.
Okay.
It was a
right.
40-minute drive.
And then how long did you teach in Lindenville?
1 year.
Okay.
Because then someone retired in Hilton,
Mm-hmm.
and a job in the junior high opened up, and I jumped at the chance.
Mm-hmm.
Better money.
Mm-hmm.
Better future, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I taught in the junior high. Great year, great kids. And the year ends, and the numbers, because at that time, the class that was coming in, the class I taught, the 8th graders and the 7th graders, were the two smallest classes to come through Hilton since the 1970s.
Okay.
And guess what? The year ends, we're cutting a teacher in every department. I'm low man.
Were you a low man again?
Yeah. And then someone from the high school retired.
And so you were able to stay on?
And I moved to the high school.
And you were there ever since?
Yep. Yep.
Oh.
That's the way I felt.
Oh. And you weren't married, obviously, at the time, right?
Yeah, I got married the second year I was teaching.
Okay.
Maybe it was the first year. Might have been the first year. It was the first year, yeah.
When did you start coaching wrestling? Go through your... Now we're going to get into coaching a little bit. Now we're going to do wrestling.
I still want to go back to those quotes.
Well, the first
up.
thing I got two really good guys that I really like. This one, Craig Caper.
Oh, good guy.
Excellent.
He was
man.
at the tournament with me.
Was he?
He was my great nephew's high school coach.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I know Craig through my mother, who worked in his classroom when he was at Hilton, and he coaches Victor Modby. He is class act coaching against. He's just really good.
Kids come first.
Yeah, and like when you play him, he's like, we communicate. We don't try to blow each other out. One year he's got a good team, when I got a good team. He doesn't. There are some coaches in Modby that'll fib to you. Oh, we're terrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I coach modified this year.
Okay, you know what it's like. Here's what Craig said, just a couple of paragraphs. Chuck is probably the most influential person in my coaching career. I could state several reasons why, but perhaps the biggest was his ability to coach each individual and each personality. All of his athletes had a role, and they understood those roles. In my early coaching career, I focused too much on a system rather than the individual, which does not work. In regards to teaching, what I always noticed with Chuck is his willingness to be himself at the front of the room. The kids figured that out and took to it. I think they appreciated it. He was also very knowledgeable about his subject matter, and his passion for history was reflected back to his students. Again, I think that is something kids appreciate. He's a good, kind-hearted, and intelligent educator/coach who has influenced many. I feel very fortunate that I had the opportunity to learn and grow from him. Craig Caper, Victor High School English teacher, varsity wrestling coach, modified football coach. Great guy coaching.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
You do, you make a big difference in people's... I think you leave a legacy, and then you don't even realize some of the people that you touched. And I'm going to end, and eventually, not right now.
Well, see, and
someone that I ran across on Saturday that, whatever.
Well, I think I talked about that at one point. I had to make a little speech, and one of the things I talked about was a Twilight Zone episode where it's called Changing of the Guard, and it's an old teacher who is being forced out. Mm-hmm. He's being forced to retire. He's at a private school. It's very English, but it's actually an American school, and he feels like he's wasted his life. And former students come back from the dead to tell him what they meant, what he meant to them, and that's I love that idea. When you find out that you did good. So, but it's interesting that Caper says that because he was a big influence on me. Mm-hmm. Because when he came in, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to continue winning. Winning was very important. And he kind of got me to back off a little bit, that winning wasn't the number one goal. It was important, but there were other things that were important too. And we had a lot of fun. We tortured each other. I don't know if he told you about any of the stuff that we did.
I never had a chance to really sit down with him, but just,
Yeah, I did horrible things to him.
How many years did he coach for you?
Coach with me.
Okay.
Maybe 3 or 4. 3 or 4. I'm thinking. I would have to think about the guys that we could. That's how I sort of frame my years. Is what year was that? Oh, that was Joey Rasenbach.
Right.
And he was there the whole time with Joey. In a couple of years with Mark Rasenbach. So he was there 5 or 6 years, maybe 4 or 5 years.
It leads me to another quote. Craig Gross. Chuck related great with all kids and focused on getting the most out of everyone. He had great teams, but focused on coaching the individual. He wanted all the wrestlers on the team to have a great experience regardless of their ability. He always said the kids that took fifth in sectionals were just as important as the sectional champ. Chuck was an amazing teacher also. I used to go up to his room daily to begin with for something related to wrestling, but I would end up staying because his class was so entertaining. I feel because he made the classroom fun, the students were eager to learn. Chuck was a great role model for me because he helped me become a better coach as far as relationships with my athletes. He also taught me a lot about strategy with dual meets and matchups. Craig Ross.
I'm ready to get buried.
All right, are you ready to?
Yeah, we could do that.
Go 6 feet under.
Yeah.
But yeah, we talk about you often when we coach football.
Well, don't forget, I coached football too.
I know. And
with some of the worst athletes I've ever coached in my life. 2 of them stand out.
I know. And like, I recall when you were coaching me on JV, and my twin brother, Pat, ended up having he had wood in his head from
it was a great story.
Family injury, yeah. And then the wood during football season started coming out of his head because the doctor didn't get it out.
They got part of it out.
Got part of it
out, and then the second part came out later, and it fit together perfectly. It was a piece of a stick.
Yes, and it was from our hedgerow.
Yeah,
because he had
fallen it playing basketball.
And your nickname?
Woody.
And it was again like that. I think Fuller was our
Bud Fuller. That was a fun year.
It really was, and I think we were 5-4. But
we were better than that. We
sure?
Oh yeah. I think we might have been like 6-2, 7. We only lost a couple.
My records get better the older I get.
Yeah, that's the key. That's a famous line. This guy that used to coach Irondequoit, Art the Bear Connerton.
Yeah.
His line was, "The older you get, the better you were."
Well, in football, how many years did you?
Just one.
Football? Just that one.
Yep.
Because I know,
that's the next year I went to Lindenville.
Okay. And I do remember, even as you got farther on in your career, Lapani always tried to get you into his program and coaching modified.
I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And the other thing about that, when he approached me about doing it, he said, "Oh, don't worry about scouting and going." And I felt like, well, if I'm not going to scout, I'm not doing the job. And it didn't feel like it would have been right.
Right.
I think it would have helped the wrestling team. But I was a classroom techer again, and that was just a
lot to take on.
Yeah, and I needed time. And another thing, and I have to be careful about this, but during my time, the administration was not totally supportive of teachers that wanted to coach.
PE teachers, it was okay. It's kind of expected, wasn't it?
I don't even think that's the case.
Right.
But it was not an athletic friendly environment for many years. And that's really all I want to say about that.
Who said that? That's all I want to say about that.
Yeah. Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another very good movie. In terms of, but you and I did a game. At least
we did several games. It was a riot.
And for Channel 12 and broadcast, you were great.
It was fun.
It was fun. We kind of, was it? I take my What's that serious comment?
I know that what I do isn't very serious,
Okay,
but I take what I do very
and
seriously.
that's the way I looked at broadcasting the games, and I brought you along.
I remember we had a lot of laughs.
And you were able to call, like I remember, okay, right about in this fourth quarter, Lapani's going to run a trick play, and before you know it, he's running this little pitch pass and stuff. Yeah, there was good times. But you were most notable.
But of course, you canned me from that job.
Yeah, that zero salary that you got. That. Yeah, and of course, most.
What
notable,
am I getting? What am I getting paid for this?
I'm not getting paid nothing. You think you're getting anything?
Well, you're getting entertained.
This thing, I just can't believe how extensive this podcast is, and this is exactly what I wanted. I'm learning things from you. Yeah, no, and I'm learning things from you. Like, I didn't realize you went to Lindenville, and
I was there 1 year. Took over for
wrestling.
Took over for another legendary coach. His name was Fred Large. He was there forever, and we lost the sectionals by 1.5 points.
Really?
One match. I had 2 kids out. 2 kids. One kid was academically ineligible, and another kid was sick. And we could have won the sectionals with one more win.
What classification is it?
It was D, small school, very small school. I taught all of the sophomores that year, and one reading class, out of my realm. I think I had 4 classes of sophomores. It was like 80 kids, and that was tough. I really liked the wrestling team there. I liked the kids. They really responded well. One of the hardest things I ever did was tell them I wasn't coming back. That, and when I told the guys I was retiring from coaching Hilton. 2 hard things to do.
When you retired from coaching Hilton, how many more years did you teach, though?
I had to write this down.
You had to write that down?
I had to write this down. 3.
Okay.
3. Yeah. And a lot of people thought I was nuts because of final average salary. But I knew I was done. I found myself, at tournaments, sitting in the corner wondering what was going on at my house. My daughters were getting older. And actually, the first year that I was out, it might have been the second year, one of those years, my daughter, cinematography major, was in charge of a film festival at Oswego. Really cool. All of the kids made short films, and they showed all of them and then gave out awards. And my daughter won, by the way.
Congrats.
Yeah, it was really good. Really
what
good.
Was your topic? Do you remember what
it was about? It was about a guy that was going off to World War II. She used my father's letters.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was really cool. My dad signed off all of his letters because we have them. His letters to my mother and to his parents from Europe, and his sign off was as ever. I think it was as ever, as always. And thought I would tell a good story, but and that was the title of the movie. And there were quotes from his letters and stuff. Very cool stuff. But anyway, I was sitting in her apartment, waiting to go to the film festival, and I looked at my phone and said, "The Dupre brothers are in the state semis right now." It was Saturday morning, and my wife said, "Do you wish you were there?" And I said, "No, I was where I wanted to be." So I knew I made the right decision. I see how good the team is and so on and so forth, but the tank was empty. Right. And Marv Levy said, if you're thinking about retiring,
you already are.
Yeah.
I mean, you had 22 years, I think. Some of the information I looked at is you were inducted into the Hilton Athletic Hall of Fame, and which we'll talk about in a little bit. Section 5 Wrestling Hall of Fame. You received the Genesee Region Coach of the Year, Hilton Athletic Directors Award for Sportsmanship and Coaching, New York State Coaches Association Honor Award, Monroe County Public School Athletic Conference Coach of the Year, and Section 5 Wrestling Terry Justice Award. And your record of 334 wins, 85 losses, and 2 ties speak speaks for itself, and I got that information off the internet.
Well,
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
You can't believe everything you read on the internet.
True.
I think I might have done that.
You might have written.
I might have done that
you might have written
Wikipedia
that.
page. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it was Wikipedia.
Yeah.
But 22 years, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was 22 or 21.
Okay, and you took over for Al Kratz, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what is it like? I mean, I've watched Coach Lapani do it for football, and I taken over for a program. Like, there's a lot of responsibility. What was it like taking over the program from Al Kratz and handling it?
The first year was tough.
Mm-hmm.
It was overwhelming. A lot of stuff to take care of. He was still in the school, and he gave me a lot of help. But it was a transition. When you change coaches like that, you lose guys. There were guys that didn't come out their senior year. I was talking to actually my friend Bill Jacoto at Spencerport.
I knew his name was going to...
He and I coached together we're good friends, fishing buddies, drinking buddies, just crazy friends. And we were talking about the fact that I never considered it my team until the last of the guys that wrestled for Al Kratz were gone.
Okay.
Just some cool things that I thought were cool. I mentioned Art Connor, the coach from Irondequoit. I had a lot of respect for the guys that came before me. Mm-hmm. Okay. I could tell you another story about that as well. And I will, if you remind me. Mm-hmm. But when we wrestled Irondequoit the first year that I was coaching, Art Connerton was a legend. He's in the Hall of Fame, several Halls of Fame. Great coach. And when we went to Irondequoit, he said, "How's it going?" And I said, "Well, it's okay. I occasionally I hear someone say that's not what Al Kratz would have done." Mm-hmm. And then something transpired in the match, and I had to make a move, and he made a move, and I made a move. And we ended up winning. Mm-hmm. And when we walked across the mat, he shook my hand and leaned in and said, "That's exactly what Al Kratz would have done." And, things like that were very meaningful to me. Yeah. Another thing about Art Connerton was he told me that year, maybe it was later on in my career when my kids were, like 4 or 5. And I used to do things like I used to get up in the morning before anybody got up Sunday morning because I was gone Friday and Saturday. Mm-hmm. And I would go down in the basement and I would grade papers and watch comedy. But I would try to get all my grading done Sunday morning before anybody got up. And then when my girls got up, I would either make breakfast or take them out to breakfast and go to like Walmart or Home Depot or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think at the time it was Chase Pitkin. And they would just, it would just be a day out. And my wife would sleep in. Mm-hmm. And the reason I did that is because Art Connerton told me, because I told him, I'm very busy with the classroom stuff and my kids. And Art Connerton said, I used to take my daughters on secret trips. I'd get up on Sunday morning, take them, and we'd be gone until noon. Mm-hmm. My wife would have the morning to herself. Mm-hmm. So that's where I got it. So I would do that. And when Art Connerton passed, I went to the calling hours. I told his daughters, I said, he gave me that. And they looked at each other and said, secret trips.
That must have been very meaningful for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
What other, I know Jocko. Did I say his name right? I know.
It does. Okay. We never say it right. Just say Bill.
Other people, I guess maybe the kids that you coached in wrestling who stuck out, or is it hard to pinpoint certain kids, certain wrestlers?
Hard to pinpoint? No, I have vivid memories of things in the practice room, stupid things in the practice room, big wins, big losses. And what Caper said, I think it was Caper or Gross, it didn't matter if you were 0-15 or 15-0. It didn't matter in my classroom if you were straight A or never did a homework assignment in your life. I had a kid who actually, he works for the school now.
Mm-hmm.
His nickname is Mr. Homework.
Mm-hmm.
He never did a homework assignment in his life. And I would still see him from time to time at the school and still call him Mr. Homework.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I remember students the same way. If I can remember them. I can't always remember them, but very often, and it's funny, I can remember the ones from the first 5 years sometimes better than the last 5 years.
Did you have a favorite season?
I always liked spring.
You know what I'm getting at.
Favorite season.
Favorite wrestling
season?
Yeah.
I was actually with a couple of my guys a couple of weeks ago, and they were asking me who was the toughest kid, who was your best team, and it would be hard to pinpoint. It's like, who's your favorite kid?
Right.
There were some good, there were a lot of good memories. I can remember the losses. The losses hurt a lot more than the wins.
Mm-hmm.
Most all wrestling seasons end with a really heartbreaking loss,
mm-hmm.
Unless you're a state champion.
Right.
Everyone except for the guys who win the state tournament or finish third or finish fifth. Everyone else loses.
Mm-hmm.
There's more unhappy losers than happy winners. So.
You also went on to coach at Brockport State. Is that correct?
Yep. After I retired.
So what was the difference between coaching high school versus college wrestlers?
I didn't have any responsibility at college.
Okay.
I was coaching with another legend, Don Murray.
Okay.
He was the head coach. He was the head coach for 51 years.
Mm-hmm.
A legend, worldwide legend,
mm-hmm.
honestly. And Bill talked me into coming over there. And the joke was that I was the good cop. I was everybody's friend. I never yelled at anybody.
Uh-huh.
I had a great job.
Yeah.
I could basically help guys
mm-hmm.
that needed help
mm-hmm.
and prop guys up that needed propping up. And the most difficult thing that I had was I never felt comfortable enough to get on anybody because it wasn't my team. And if I said the wrong thing or acted too hard-nosed and drove somebody out, I was responsible.
Mm-hmm.
So I never wanted to make anyone mad at me.
Mm-hmm.
So I never was really able to say anything other than I was positive, tried to be positive.
And then you also did some work at a modified level too. Which school you been working
I coached at Greece this year.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the modified level?
Modified Greece.
And what's that like for you?
I had forgotten what middle school kids were like. The modified program in New York State is not very conducive to developing serious wrestling.
No kidding.
It's a very short season.
That's right. Don't they start in like mid-December? Or?
They start in the last week. They start the week after Thanksgiving,
mm-hmm.
and they end the last week of January.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very quick, and there's no team score, and it's hard to teach. Wrestling is a sport that is unnatural to kids.
Yeah.
There's more. I think there's more teaching in wrestling than there is in just about any other sport, and you have to overcome a natural tendency to do this or that. So it's tough, and there's a lot of teaching involved, and it was difficult to make a lot of progress.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it was fun.
Was that just 1 year you did it?
I did it this year. I hadn't coached at Brockport. This was my second year out of Brockport, and I ran into a kid that wrestled for me 30 years ago, 35 years ago, and he's the assistant athletic director at Greece Arcadia.
Okay.
And he asked me if I was coaching anywhere, and I said no. And he said, "Do you want to?" And I said, "Not really." And he talked me into it. And it was a good experience. I worked with another guy, and we had fun. you have to have a good relationship with the guys you're coaching with,
Absolutely.
because you spend a lot of time together. And
Yeah. Couple things. My brother said something to me. Do you have a quote that says if you have 3 kids, one of them does this, one of them does this? Do you remember what it is?
I've never heard that quote.
You've never heard it? Okay. If you have 3 kids, one of them has braces, one of them goes to a MoCo. You've never said that?
No.
Okay. All right, I'll skip that.
I'm kind of curious what happened to the third kid.
Well, I can't go into that, but it's a very funny thing. It's something that you would say.
Well, I might have said it.
Yeah.
I've said a lot of things.
What I was saying is things that you've said or done, or the effect that you've had on people. People like.
I'll tell you another story. This kind of blew me away. I worked for a few years in AIS with kids who had failed the Regents exam, and that made me a better teacher. Okay, because I taught myself how to prepare kids for the Regents exam. And then I left AIS and went back in the classroom, and one of the things that you had to instill in kids is confidence.
Right.
Because that's a big part of school. And, kids will come in and say, I can't do this. And I would say, you have to change the way you see this. You can't say, I can't do this. And what I would tell them is, if you locked your keys in your car, you wouldn't say, I can't get in my car, I'll never get home. You'd say, how am I going to get my keys? So you can't sit down at a test and say, I can't do this. You have to sit down and say, how am I going to do this?
Right.
And then you would give them the tools to figure out how to do it. And one of the things I would always tell the kids is, you know more than you think you do. You have to have confidence. Because kids who struggle will say, I think the answer is this, but if I think that's the answer, it must be wrong. And I would try to get them to realize, if you think it's the right answer, there's a reason for that. It might be that you know more than you think you do. So I went to calling hours for someone a couple of years ago, and I ran into one of the students that I had, and we talked for a little while, and she said, I want to show you something. And she had a tattoo on her arm that said, you know more than you think you do.
And that came from you?
That came from me. Which I thought was kind of cool. Even though I don't like tattoos.
You kind of remind me of something. Like on Saturday, I had to go to doctor's for a procedure, and I was wearing my Hilton football sweatshirt. And the lady nurse comes out. She goes, "Oh, you coach in football?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh, I'm going to name drop somebody on it. You know Chuck Partridge?" And I said, "I sure do. I'm doing a podcast with him." And she said her name was Celeste Bianchi, and her husband was named Bram Bianchi.
Oh, yeah, I wrestled Bram Bianchi in high school.
Okay.
And I know Celeste.
And she said that you had helped their children when they were younger growing up. And they still remember you to this day, like they were struggling as 5th and 6th graders, but you had helped them in wrestling too.
Yeah, they wrestle for McQuaid.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's a small world. And again, like, I'm just going to a procedure in some doctor's office, and there was somebody recognizing.
I would be really nervous if someone dropped my name before they did a procedure on me.
You don't want to know what the procedure was either. But, I just think you've had a huge effect on people. You were Teacher of the Year. Was that 2004, was it?
I don't know what
you don't know. You're such a humble guy. It doesn't matter. I think
It was a bad year for teachers. Let me just tell you, I told you before that I had tremendous respect for those that came before me.
Yes.
And there was another situation. I don't know. You must have known Ojars Vitas.
Of course. Yeah. He was a great teacher. My brother
great teacher.
He said he would start the unity, give them one page, and that was all they had to learn by the end.
He was a great teacher. Okay, good guy. When he passed away, I was teaching at the high school, and there was a party for teachers at the high school and calling hours. I went to the calling hours, and naturally the older staff was there, the people that were around when I was getting started. And then I went to the Christmas party with people who are teaching with me now. and I felt more comfortable at the calling hours than I did at the party.
I bet.
And it was just because I had a good time at the party, but I just had so much respect for these people that were older than me.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing, and maybe you can relate to this with your sports, but when I got into the Section 5 Hall of Fame, I had to make a little speech. One of the things I said was, I remember going to matches when I was a kid with my father, when I was in junior high,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing guys win the county tournament, the sectional tournament. And these guys were 17 years old, 16 years old. And I still think of them as men.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were men to me.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, this guy, Dave Travis, his name is, a small 105-pounder from Spencerport, this sectional champ, always a winner.
Mm-hmm.
He came into the golf course. Now he's like 70 years old. And I was in awe. It was like I saw Elvis. You know, I looked at him. You're Dave Travis.
Uh-huh.
Oh, my God.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of embarrassing, but that's the way I remember that. And I will still go back and look at the old, tournament brackets and just go, man, they were legendary in my mind. And in reality, they were just high school kids.
Mm-hmm. As we start to finish up here.
I think I've talked a lot.
No,
how long have we gone here?
Doesn't matter.
You're going to have to edit.
I hate to do this to people on the spot. What are 3 words you would use to describe Hilton and how it's? What do you think? 3, if you can put 3.
Well, I don't know exactly how to answer that. The first thing I would say is 2 words: dramatically different
Mm-hmm.
than it was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Hilton of the 1970s versus the Hilton of the 2020s is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great place to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I had a great neighborhood. I had great friends. I had a great high school experience. Remember that when I was a freshman and went into that building, it was a school without walls.
Mm-hmm.
It was the packet system.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the 70s. And it was a very progressive school.
Mm-hmm.
There was a tremendous amount of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big freedoms was freedom to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And when I took, I guess it was algebra, I started as a freshman. I was on packet 9 for about 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
I was on it when I started my sophomore year. I could go really fast in one class and really slow in another. But 3 words to describe Hilton. Again, the Hilton that I grew up in was friendly. It was fun. And it was kind of slow.
Mm-hmm.
Life was kind of Mayberry-ish.
Mm-hmm.
The highlight of the summer was the carnival.
Another question. Advice, you're now grandpa age pretty much, right? What would your advice be to parents raising a kid, raising an athlete, raising a student?
First one would be read. Again, I really remember seriously making a conscious effort to have my daughters see me read. I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I also remember making a very conscious decision to let my kids know that I didn't need to have alcohol to have a good time, because we drank a lot before we had kids, and I just wanted to show some moderation. Be flexible,
Sense of humor.
To a certain extent. Be creative. I could tell you stories. When my older daughter was in junior high, we had to go to an award ceremony for her music, and she came out to the table with holes in her jeans and a half shirt on. And she was in 8th grade or 7th grade. And I said, you can't, and my friends know this story. You can't wear that to the awards. She said, why not? And I said, because people will think, what will people think of you? He said, it's an awards night. He said, I don't care what people think of me. They shouldn't judge me on my clothing. They shouldn't judge people because of what they wear. And I go, I'm not going to fight with you. If that's what you want, fine. So she's all happy. She won. So I go in my bedroom and I come out with blue silk gym shorts on, black socks, brown shoes, and a white T-shirt. And I had written with a Sharpie, Emily Partridge's dad. I said, let's go. She said, you can't wear that. I said, you can't tell me what to wear.
Right.
She said, people will think you're crazy. I said, people shouldn't judge you based on what you wear. She said, Mom won't go with you. And I said, you should see what she's putting on. Which was completely false. But she changed her clothes. And then we told some other parents at the award thing, and this woman said, you would have got a standing ovation. Because she said, my daughter said, I'm not going. And I said, I'll go without you. And when they call your name, I'll go up on stage.
Right.
She said, I'll go change.
Well, I think your family's lucky to have you. I think your daughters are lucky to have you as a dad.
Wow.
I think your grandkids are going to be lucky if that's the direction your daughters decide to go in. I knew I was going to enjoy sitting down with you. And
I'm done?
Yeah.
I'm just getting started.
Just getting started. Well, we might have to come back for another time, but any final thoughts? I mean, you really said a lot of
I talk a lot.
Stuff.
I talk a lot. The good news is no one's going to see this except you and me.
History. Kids act, they get mad at me when I have to teach them social studies. And they say, why do we have to learn this? I said, well, history can repeat itself. Yeah.
But there's no good answer.
There isn't.
There is no good answer.
And
most kids that I see will tell me, and people my own age will say, I never liked history when I was in school. Now I love it.
Mm-hmm. I wish I had paid more attention to teachers like you in high school. But I have great teachers, Szymanski, Ballerstein, whatever. I didn't have Vitas. Didn't have you. You were
you didn't have me.
But yeah, I think it's a very it's a discipline that has to be.
Well, the nice thing,
be careful with it.
One of the things that I liked about it, and I would tell the kids this, is in math class, 2 and 2 is 4.
Exactly.
Okay. In social studies, just because you think it's right doesn't mean it's right. And towards the end of my career, I taught government, which I absolutely love, because I didn't teach government as much as let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. Why do you think this? Why do you think that? It was fun.
It teaches critical thinking, and you can't have it. If you have an opinion, you have to prove your opinion and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I've just really enjoyed this 2 hours.
It's been 2 hours.
You're the longest podcast guest so far. But
edit this. Take most of me out. Just keep yourself.
We've probably kept on the Partridge family. Funny. They probably listen to the whole thing. You'll get some listens.
I don't know.
Thank you very much, Chuck.
A pleasure.
Uncle Chuck.
A pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. This has been Mike Heiss with the Big H Podcast saying goodbye, and we'll be back with more episodes.
Who's next?
In the future. Who's next? Who can live up to you? Good night.